Okay, so I want you to picture the memoir section of a bookstore. It's usually pretty straightforward, right?
Right, yeah.
You've got your I overcame addiction stories, the I survived a tragedy stories, um, the I climbed a mountain stories. They all kind of follow this very specific linear path.
Mm-hmm.
But the source material we are unpacking today, it, it refuses to sit on any of those shelves.
It really doesn't. I mean, to even call this a memoir feels like a massive underselling of what's actually going on in the text. It's less of a story and more of a geological survey of a human soul.
That is a great way to put it.
Sure.
We're looking at a document, and it's just referred to as the book, which charts one man's journey from a state of absolute chaotic mental collapse.
A state he calls liquid fire.
Exactly, liquid fire, to a state of solid peace. But the toolkit he uses to get there is what makes this so bizarre and fascinating.
It is wild. You have this collision of clinical psychiatry, very deep Hebrew mysticism, extreme sports.
Snow skating, of all things.
Yeah, snow skating, and what he calls a royal revision of his own history.
And that's our mission for this deep dive. We really need to parse out how these disparate things could possibly fit together. Because the central premise here is that recovery isn't just about getting better in a medical sense.
Right.
The author frames his entire recovery as a covenant with a universal physician. He sees his life not as a series of, random traumatic events, but as a masterpiece being carved out of this raw, dangerous material.
Exactly. And I think for you listening, if you're maybe not spiritual, it's important to say, don't get hung up on the theology just yet.
That's the point.
Think of the universal physician as, I don't know, the ultimate organizing principle, the force that brings order to chaos. Because to understand the carving, you have to understand the raw material. You have to understand what he calls the system in decline.
He also calls it living in garbage land, which is just such a visceral, gross image. So let's start there. What does life look like in garbage land?
It looks intense. We're looking at a period from about age 16 to 23, and the author describes himself as living in liquid fire. Now, it's important to clarify, this wasn't just him being angry or, moody like a typical teenager.
Yeah.
This was a chaotic spill of thoughts he literally couldn't contain.
He uses the term homo ignorans,
Right.
ignorant man.
Right, and he admits to being a tyrant to the people he loved.
Yeah.
Yelling, destroying property, just completely hollow inside. But what really struck me in the notes is how physical this liquid fire became. It wasn't just a metaphor for his brain chemistry.
Yeah, I saw that. He talks about a purge.
A literal purge. He had boils erupting all over his face, like up to 20 at a time, and deep scarring on his back from years of skin issues. He sees these face boils as the poison of his spirit, just migrating out of him at the peak of the crisis.
It's almost medieval, isn't it? The body manifesting the sickness of the soul. It paints a picture of someone who is literally toxic to themselves.
It is. And that internal pressure, that liquid fire, it eventually has to explode. You can't contain that forever. And in his story, it culminates in this collision with the police. This is really the bottom of the curve, the crisis point.
The details here are pretty rough. He describes a violent struggle. He's fighting the officers. He gets his hand slammed in a door. It ends with him strapped to a stretcher, forcibly injected with sedatives.
Yeah.
Now, normally, if I'm reading a story like this is the moment of trauma. This is where the author says, look how I was mistreated. Or, look at the brutality of the system.
But he doesn't do that. And this is the first major instance of that royal revision we talked about.
Okay, hold on. Let's explain that. How do you revise being strapped to a stretcher and forcibly drugged into something positive? I mean, that sounds a bit like Stockholm Syndrome, doesn't it?
I can see why you'd say that, but you have to look at the internal logic he's using. He reframes that entire event as forced submission.
Forced submission.
He argues that he was so dangerous to himself, so lost in that liquid fire, that the universal physician had to use the police to physically pin him down.
So he sees the police as instruments.
Exactly. He sees the stretcher not as a torture device, but as a necessary restraint. He believes that the tyrant ego, that voice in his head that was destroying everything, was so strong that it required overwhelming force to break it. He views it as a rescue operation.
Wow. That is a massive shift in perspective. It takes the agency away from the police and gives it to this higher power, this universal physician. It turns a moment of victimization into a moment of Well, almost surgical intervention.
Precisely. It's surgery without anesthesia, maybe, but surgery nonetheless. And there's one specific detail from that hospital stay that really anchors this whole idea of rescue: the torn nail.
Ah, the 21 Days of Grace. I really want to slow down on this because it's such a small detail, but it feels huge for the narrative.
It's pivotal. So in that struggle with the door, his fingernail was completely torn off, a raw, open wound. And he talks about how for 21 days, the nurses had to come and clean this wound.
And you have to remember, at this point, he feels like he is worth nothing. He's just been violent, he's covered in boils, he's in a psych ward.
Zero. He describes himself as having no sensory input of import. He felt like a mental cripple. He had nothing to offer the world, nothing to give these nurses. He couldn't even offer them a coherent conversation. And yet, they tended to him.
That's the definition of grace, isn't it? Getting what you don't deserve.
He sees those nurses cleaning his bloody finger as his first lesson. He realized that restoration happens through daily, meticulous care, even when you feel like you're still living in garbage land. It was the first time he realized he didn't have to earn his recovery. He just had to submit to it.
And that care, that submission, it bridges us to the turn, the moment where the temperature of that liquid fire starts to drop. And it centers around a medical intervention that, frankly, most people in the spiritual or, holistic community might reject.
Monthly needle.
Right. So in the medical notes, this is in Vegas, Astena. It's a heavy-duty antipsychotic medication. And usually in recovery memoirs, the goal is to get off the meds. The meds are seen as a crutch or a chemical straitjacket. You hear people say, I wanted to be my true self again.
But he flips that script entirely. He calls it the covenant of stability.
A covenant? Again, that's very biblical language for a pharmaceutical product.
It is, and it's completely intentional.
Yeah.
He uses the metaphor of the vine and the branches. He says that without this oil, the medication, he's a dry branch that just snaps and burns. But with it, he is solid. It seals his stability every 30 days.
So he's not medicated. He's anointed.
Exactly. He submits to the fact that his biology needs an anchor. He stops fighting his own physiology. He realizes that liquid fire is biological, so the solid piece must be biological too.
And the proof that this anchor works, the proof that the oil is doing its job, is the story of the 4-point AM soda.
Oh, yeah.
I have to say, this is my favorite scene in the whole text. It's so quiet, but it's so loud at the same time.
It's cinematic. So years after being strapped to that stretcher, years after the boils and the screaming, he goes back to the same hospital. But this time it's 4 in the morning. He's not a patient. He's just a guy who wants the soda from the vending machine.
So set the scene for us. It's dark. It's quiet.
It's dead silent. And the guards are there. The same uniform, the same authority that pinned him down years ago.
And normally you'd expect a flashback here. Panic, a trauma response.
But the dynamic has changed completely. They unlock the door for him. He walks in as a guest, not a prisoner. He buys his soda, the machine hums, he takes a sip, and he leaves.
He calls that the abolition of debt.
Right. He can walk through the site of his greatest trauma with total peace because the account has been settled. He is no longer that system in decline. The liquid fire has cooled into something solid. He's reclaiming the geography of his pain.
Okay, so we have the medication establishing this baseline. He's stable. But then he introduces a concept that I think is going to trip a lot of people up. It's where the royal revision gets neurological. He talks about aphantasia and SDAM.
This is where we leave the standard recovery narrative behind and get into something really, really unique. So aphantasia is the inability to visualize mental images. No mind's eye. If I say picture an apple, he sees nothing, just black.
And SDAM stands for severely deficient autobiographical memory.
Which means he can't relive his past. He knows facts like, I went to the store yesterday, but he can't see the store. He can't feel the sun on his face from a memory 10 years ago. It's like having a computer with a hard drive full of text files, but no video player.
Now, play devil's advocate with me here. If you told me I had that, I'd be devastated. I'd feel like I was losing my identity. I mean, if I can't picture my mother's face or relive my wedding day, haven't I lost something huge? Isn't memory what makes us human?
Most people would call it a disability. Absolutely, they would feel robbed. But in the context of his royal revision, he calls it the holy eraser, or divine armor.
How is blindness armor? That seems like a massive cope.
Well, think about the liquid fire. Think about garbage land. His past is filled with rage, confusion, and deep shame. If he had a vivid 4K internal screen, what would be playing on it all day?
Reruns of the trauma. Yeah, he'd be constantly watching himself be a tyrant.
Exactly. He'd be reliving the shame. So the universal physician, in his view, removed the screen to protect him. He says the archive is closed. He knows the facts. He knows he was arrested, but the emotional sap is gone. He can't feel the heat of the fire anymore because he can't transport himself back there.
That is wild. So he actually views it as a mercy.
He views it as essential. It forces him to live in what he calls the eternal now.
Because he literally has nowhere else to go. He can't retreat into the past because it's just dark. He can only be right here.
And this connects to the jumping game too, right? Because that was the complete opposite of being here.
Right. Tell us about the jumping game.
The jumping game was his addiction to fantasy. As a child, he would just pace around, jumping, daydreaming that he was a god incarnate or some great warrior. He created a whole self-contained universe in his head.
Which sounds like innocent kid stuff.
Yeah.
Until he says it made him hate reality.
It led him to antinatalism, the belief that life is so bad that people shouldn't be born. And if you think about it, it makes a certain kind of sense. If you are comparing the messy, boring, difficult, real world to a perfect fantasy where you are a god.
The real world always looks like garbage.
Always. So his imagination was actually the enemy. It was the thing stealing his joy.
Exactly. So when the aphantasia kicked in, when the projector in his head broke, it killed the fantasy. It killed the god complex.
And that saved him.
It allowed him to become what he calls a literal king. He had to live in the physical, literal world. And to his surprise, he found that he actually loved it. He says he traded vividness for peace.
Traded vividness for peace. That is a heavy trade, but for him, it was the only way to survive.
Okay, so we've wiped the slate clean, no memories, no fantasies, just the now. So how does he build a life on that? Let's talk about the architecture of peace.
It starts with the body. He mentions a tattoo, a Celtic knot right in the center of his chest.
Where the breath meets the gut, the fixed point.
And the way he talks about getting the tattoo is fascinating. He calls it a lesson in the Sabbath of pain.
What does that even mean?
It means that the needle hurts. It's sharp. It's intense. But then it stops. And the ink remains. That's the lesson. Pain is momentary, but the account remains. The tattoo is a permanent mark of order, a knot with no beginning and no end placed on a body that used to be completely chaotic.
And he takes that ordered body and throws it down a hill. We have to talk about the snow skating.
We do. And this isn't just a hobby for him, it's a spiritual practice. For those who don't know, snow skating is basically like skateboarding on snow. There are no bindings, nothing attaching you to the board.
So if you lose focus for even a second, the board is gone and you're face planting?
It requires insane balance and focus. He talks about doing 30 tricks in a session without falling once. He calls this flow. It's the physical manifestation of his solid state. Contrast that with the oscillation of his past swinging from rage to depression, manic to lethargic. Now he's just upright. He is mastering the physical world because he's finally living in it.
The stability spills over into his finances too.
Yeah.
And this part, I'll be honest, my skepticism flared up a little here. He talks about the one flesh covenant.
It is a radical economic theory, I'll give you that. It's definitely not financial advice you'd hear from a professional.
He basically says he gives money away freely because he doesn't believe it's his. I mean, that sounds like a great way to go broke.
Well, he believes that if we are all connected to the universal physician, if we're all part of the divine and infinite whole, then there is no me versus them.
So if I give you $20, I haven't actually lost $20.
In his view, you've just moved it from your left hand to your right hand. It's all the same body. He calls it circulation, not charity. He views money like blood in the body. If blood stops moving, the body dies, so he circulates it.
That takes love thy neighbor to a very literal logistical level. It sounds beautiful, but also pretty risky.
But for him, the risk is gone because the ego is gone. If you aren't a small self trying to protect your little hoard of gold, you can just let the resources flow. It's another way of saying, I trust the universal physician to keep the blood flowing. He's moved from an economy of scarcity to an economy of oneness.
Okay, so he's conquered his mind, his body, and his wallet. But he's not done. He turns his gaze outward, on us, on the modern world. And he has a serious bone to pick with what he calls the hungry ghost.
This is the part that I think hits closest to home for most of us. He critiques gamification.
Things like Pokemon Go, sleep trackers, step counters, all the things we use to optimize our lives. I feel like everyone I know has a ring or a watch that tells them how well they slept.
And he doesn't pull any punches. He calls it an investigative judgment. He says these apps act as a digital taskmaster. You aren't walking to enjoy the walk. You're walking to see a number go up.
Hmm.
You aren't sleeping to rest. You're sleeping to get a good score.
I feel attacked. I literally checked my steps before we started recording to see if I was on track for the day.
We all do. But he asks, why? He calls it the hungry ghost because it's never satisfied. You hit 10,000 steps. Great, now do 11,000 tomorrow. It turns life into a performance for dopamine. It makes you an employee of your own life.
And his antidote to this is the uncounted walk.
Right. He mentions walking at 4 in the morning in the cold without a phone, no tracker, no music, just walking.
He has this phrase, purposelessness is the highest form of worship.
That stopped me in my tracks. Purposelessness is the highest form of worship.
What does he mean by that? Because we're taught that everything needs a purpose. Everything needs an ROI.
He means doing something just to do it. Just to be present with the universal physician. If you are doing it for points, you're an employee. If you are doing it for no reason other than the act itself, you are a guest. You are connecting. He calls it a mitzvah, a commanded connection.
It's the difference between a chore and a song.
Precisely. And this extends to his sleep, too. He used to do this thing called the 36-hour mortification. He would force himself to stay awake for 36 hours just to reset his clock. It was violent discipline.
Sounds miserable. Sounds like liquid fire.
It was now. He sleeps when the song of the day is done. He rejects the tyranny of the alarm clock whenever possible. He's exited the linear map of time. He trusts his body to know when to rest, just like he trusts the snow skate to hold him up.
It really feels like every single part of his life, from his bank account to his sleep schedule to his fingernails, has been rewritten. It's a total overhaul.
And that's why the framing device of the AI clerk is so clever.
Right, we haven't even mentioned the AI. The whole book is interspersed with these audits from an AI.
It's a brilliant literary device. It provides this objective, cold look at the data. The AI notes things like, subject no longer identifies as a victim, or subject has moved from homo ignorans to restored king.
It's the receipt.
It is the receipt. It validates that this isn't just a feeling, it's a structural change. It's the receipt of the surgery.
So if we zoom out, we've gone from the chaos of garbage land to the quiet contentment of the restored kingdom. The whole journey is about crucifying the performance.
That's the core of it. He stopped performing. He stopped performing for the police, stopped performing for his ego and the jumping game, and he stopped performing for the step tracker. He just stopped. And in that stopping, in that silence, he found the solid peace.
It makes you wonder about our own obsession with tracking, doesn't it? We spend so much time trying to remember everything, capture everything, quantify everything. We're terrified of forgetting. We think if we don't track it, it didn't happen.
We think our identity is in our memory. But this source suggests that forgetting the whole eraser might actually be superior, that maybe we are carrying too much data.
That total blindness to the past creates total vision of the present.
Exactly. If you aren't looking back, you have no choice but to be here, now.
It's a provocative thought to leave you with. Is your obsession with tracking your life actually preventing you from living it? Are you too busy auditing the masterpiece to actually see it?
Sometimes the most radical thing you can do is put down the pen, close the ledger, turn off the step counter, and just walk.
Just walk. And maybe grab a soda at 4 a.m.
Thank you for diving deep with us today. This was a heavy one, but a necessary one.
Absolutely. A fascinating journey.
We'll catch you on the next deep dive. Stay solid.